Hello and good evening to everyone. Welcome to the second talk of Towards Anarchism. That it's a series of weekly events aiming at exploring and learning how anarchic processes affect inhabited space in its forms, dynamics, and organization. I'm Matteo Fontana, curator of this series of events, and I would like to thank also the Student Senate of University U of Venice for the support in the realization of it. This evening, we are happy to have Titus Gebel as our guest for our talk with the title Anarchism as a Voluntary Practice. Now we have a short introduction, of course, of him. We have to present him. Titus Gebel is a German entrepreneur with a PhD in international law, inventor of private cities concept, the free private cities concept that he's talking in his presentation in a few minutes. He's the president of the society with the same name and CEO of TIPOLIS. After retiring in 2015 as a CEO of a Frankfurt-listed mining company, he emigrated with his family to Monaco. With free private cities, he wants to create an entirely new product in the market of living together. Titus has written the book Free Private Cities, Making Governments Compete for You, where he's stating the theoretical and practical groundwork of his vision. At the same time, he is working with his partners to make the first free private city a reality. Of course, we are in live streaming. I would like to remind you that you can interact with this event already starting from now, writing your questions, comments, considerations in the comment section below, both on Facebook and YouTube. And then later on in the talk, in the Q&A session, we will pick some of them to discuss together. So welcome, Titus.
Hello, Matteo.
I will leave you now the stage if you want to share your screen. So then we can start with the first part.
Yeah, with pleasure. I'm trying to open up then the presentation. Can you see it?
Yes, here we have on the screen.
Excellent. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk to you about free private cities making governments compete for you. So this is indeed, as was announced, as a new concept. I have developed that after I decided in 2015 that being politically active for about 30 years, that there's no chance to convince people about the beauties of self-determination, self-responsibility, and free markets. And so far, I thought I have to come up with a new idea that is on a voluntary basis, just creating a new product. And it's called Free Private Cities, and we'll talk to you in the next 20-25 minutes about the concept and the implementation and the advantages that will result from that model, and how it can be, how realistic it is that we can achieve this in our lifetime. And afterwards, I'm happy to receive your questions and participate in the discussion. So, government is the biggest market of all. Actually, governance is the world's largest industry. If you combine all the global spending by the state, it's about 30%. So it's bigger than energy, health, or manufacturing. So it's by far the biggest industry. It's just not considered to be an industry, but in fact it is. Because at the end of the day, it's just a service. And I'll tell you why later. the problem is it's highly concentrated and inefficient. 5% of the states control 80% of the market, money-wise, and 90% lose money every year. I mean, this is tremendous, right? If you compare this to the other markets, energy, health, manufacturing that you have on the left side here, I mean, a market where 90% of the participants lose money every year is not something you can imagine. It's unimaginable in the real world, in the market world. But this is the reality in states. So something must be wrong. And on top of that, 80%, at least according to polls in the US and the UK, are dissatisfied how their nation is governed. And that is regardless which party is in power. This is a general dissatisfaction. And I think the main reason for that is this here. The social contract is not considered to be something that is serving the people any longer. And what I want to tell you is that it was always a fraud, or it was always only half the truth. This gentleman is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and he is normally quoted as the guy who came up with the idea of the social contract, so that we all give away some of our power laid in the hands of the state. But what they don't tell you at school or in university is that he also said, the quote I have here written down, even majority rule is subject to prior agreement and requires initial consent of every single person. And that is very, very important, because it says, no, you cannot force democracy upon people, because they have first to agree that they accept that there's a majority making decisions for them, even if they don't agree with it. And that is not the case in basically no society, right? That's the problem. And that is exactly the problem, which leads to a lot of more problems, that leads to the fact that now governments say basically they can do whatever they want as long as they have the majority. And if they put their people into the courts, then they can literally do what they want, as long as they have the majority. So I think even in the constitutions, you have the problem. If you have a constitution that is accepted by the majority, then you will still have, or let's assume a new constitution, then you still have people who did not agree to that. And this was Rousseau refers to as a prior agreement. So that is exactly what is missing, and that is nothing you would accept in the rest of your life. You would not accept if half of us who are listening now today to this presentation, or half plus one, decide that the other half has to give them 1,000 euro. But this is a majority rule, right? And you said, I haven't agreed to that. Yep. Bad luck. We just decided by majority that we have majority rule. This is one of the problems that is not really understood, I would say, when it comes to the social contract. But this is, if you compare it to a normal contract, it's fully clear, because I cannot, let's say I make a contract with a restaurant, say my friends are coming, we have 15 persons, and show me your menu, and then you order a certain menu for a certain price, and you agree on that, and then suddenly during your party the owner comes and say, by the way, we have changed the menu and you're getting more, but you have to pay double. And you said, are you mad? That's not what I agreed upon. And so nobody would accept that. You'd say, we have a contract, right? But you cannot come to the state and say we have a contract, because you don't have. And that's exactly the problem. And even if you had a contract, what is it worth if one side can change it arbitrarily any day? And that's if a majority is producing new rules any day, then you have a problem, because you cannot influence that. Right. So this is a big problem, and that's why so many people feel dissatisfied. because they know, they feel that their will doesn't play a role. They have no influence on the contract. They cannot make any decision that influences the content of this contract. So what's the alternative? Well, a free private city. The free private city is an entity where there is protection of life, liberty, and property. So the classical liberal minimal state, as you want, but it is provided through a private governance service provider, a company, and you pay a fixed amount, which is fixed and written down in the contract, and you accept that by your signature. So you have a contract with rights and duties where it's written like a fallback legal system, fallback dispute resolution in case you do not agree with the other party to something. There will also be some duties, but there will also be rights that you can do basically what you want as long as you leave your fellow citizens alone. And last but not least is 100% voluntary. You do not like the rules in the contract, you just stay away. You do not like it over time, you go. No problem, right? The only thing is what can happen to you is, okay, you have paid for 1 year in advance the protection fee or whatever you call it, service fee, which is probably for this minimal state not more than 1,500 euro per year and per person. And you might lose this if you go away in March and you've paid for the whole year, but that's all, right? So this is a contractual society, and you can immediately see the difference that you know the rules in advance. And now people come and say, hey, but the modern society is so complex, you need constantly new rules. And my thesis is that this is not true, because for several hundred years it has worked that, and I'm referring to the common law system, that the idea was that there are some rules or customs and people stick to them. And if something pops up which is really not solvable and there's no rule or there's no regulation or no customs, then the judge can make a decision, and from then on, this is the law of the land. So that's how common law worked for a very, very long time, and it worked very well, made England the most successful country in the world. So I would even say, from my knowledge out of the real world, that the more complicated the rules and the laws are, the more you will find loopholes, you will find tricky people who can make an advantage out of a special law to the disadvantage of their competitors, for example. And at the end, you will win nothing, because the law is so complex that nobody knows what it is, actually. So my counter proposal is make few rules, but these rules are absolutely binding. You know them in advance. If you don't like them, and there can be a free private city where they want to have where certain clauses, or they say alcohol is forbidden in our free private city because we are all abstinent. That's fine. If I know in advance, I wouldn't go there because I like wine, right? It's like just easy as this. It's like in a supermarket for societies. You go into that system that fits your personality best. And the good thing is, you have a contract, and the contract says these are your rights, these are your duties. And there might be some areas where the contract can be changed by the operator. But if this is too broad, then it's not attractive, because then you suddenly are insecure again. You do not know what will happen tomorrow, right? So this is why this idea that you all already know from civil life, we just transfer that to the market of living together. Now, what are the advantages compared to the states we have today? Well, first, the operating company is a private company for profit, has skin in the game. So if the operating company of a free private city performs not good, then what will happen? People will become dissatisfied. They will leave the city. It will make work. You lose your reputation, and eventually you will become insolvent. Now you compare that with a politician of today who can make all kinds of bad decisions. And the very worst thing that can happen to him is that he's voted out of office with a very big pension. So that is not really an incentive to make good decisions, unreasonable decisions. So on the other hand, the operator of a free private city has the incentive to treat customers well and not waste resources, because the customers are paying and the resources is what he is giving him eventually the profit. Another very interesting thing is there's no forum for people to impose their will upon others. And that is why this contract is so interesting and important. If everyone has a bilateral contract with the operator, then your fellow residents know they cannot influence your contract as a third party. So they cannot run to a parliament or government and say, hey, we want a new rule because of whatever. Then the operator has to say, I hear what you say, but my hands are tied because I cannot break my contract. I cannot force people to pay for your newer swimming pool idea because they have a contract saying they only have to pay 1,500 a year for protection of life, liberty, and property, some infrastructure, and dispute resolution. So there's no swimming pool in it. So you choose your fellows, you like the swimming pool idea, and you make this on your own, and you can maybe charge a higher fee from others who didn't participate in that undertaking. And likewise, there's no extra fee for military interventions in other countries, right? Because you say, let's educate them how Western democracy should work. Let's send troops. No way. People will not, unless you can find people who pay for this voluntarily. It's not possible in a free private city. And it's not possible because of the contractual system. And as with all contracts, the city operator can be held liable. Here's an example. You have to pay this amount for protection of life, liberty, and property. But now something happens. You are robbed in the free private city. You go to the free private city operator and say, hey, wait a minute. I've paid for security. Now, operator, I've been robbed. So you owe me damages. And that is true because the city operator didn't keep his contractual promise. And that's how it is in the rest of the world, in the civil world, in the non-state world. If you misperform, you own damages. And that is something which is also very, very good thing because it puts some pressure on the operator to deliver his service as well. Now go to your government and say, hey, infrastructure is a mess, education is a mess, there's no more security here. I'm cutting my tax payments. They will laugh at you and you will end up in prison, right? There's no counter right at all. Taxes are independently from state services. That's what all political scientists and theorists say. And that is true, right? You just have to pay because they decided, and you don't have any counter rights. And last but not least, it takes away political struggle, right? In a world of free private city or comparable entities where the participation is voluntary, you don't have to argue with people who want to establish communism. You just say, well, you make your communist city and we make our libertarian city, and there's no need to argue. You go what you fits best and we go into our system. Of course we think that our system will work better than the communist one, but who knows, maybe these people are satisfied with living on a very low level, but they have other advantages instead. So we could basically forget about all these political struggles. We say, hey, I'm not going to argue any longer with you. You make your own society, I might make mine, and there are other options on the market, other offers, and we can see and choose what is best, and we can see and try out many, many things. And that would also lead to a much quicker development of new and better and good systems that we may not know today, because there's more competition, it's more trial and error, it's more discovery procedures. What would be the result? If we have really legal certainty that the contract is not changed by one side or by a third party, we have guaranteed security by the provider. We have more freedom because we can actually do what we want unless we disturb others. We have more diversity, especially diversity of ideas. And we have less politics. That would lead to long-term stability and prosperity, like it was in the country, in the city, which is here in the background, which is Hong Kong, during British times, because the British actually left the colony alone. And this was more an administration than a government. And that worked. And now for the real world, you might have heard of the Honduran sedes. There are two sedes in the meantime, the Sede Prospera and the Sede Morazan. I was involved in creating the legal structure of the Sede Prospera. And both sedes have adopted the contractual model, which was basically my proposal. And they are real now. And my company, TIPOLIS, what is a company who wants to make this models a reality, has just negotiated a memorandum of understanding with an African country that I cannot disclose yet, but it's already starting. The seasteading guys, they have real projects now ongoing in Central America. And I have shown you here the quote of Joe Quirk, who's the president of the institute. And this is basically also something which comes from this idea that you should have the freedom to choose. He says, we believe that citizens must opt in to a society with informed consents to an explicit social contract, and they must have the freedom to exit if they no longer believe that society is serving them. As long as those conditions hold, the details of that contract are not our concern. So that is something what all of us should consider, that maybe we are wrong. Maybe we are not correct, that our political views or ideological or philosophical views, they might be wrong. But maybe they're right, but maybe they're partly right. So that does not matter. So leave other people their will. They should try out what they think is best. And I think at the end, we will find out that people are different. We know this basically right now, but we will find out that people are different, and there's not one size fits all system. Some people would prefer more freedom. Other people do not like freedom. They want guidance and leadership. We have to accept that. It's not that we can judge those people and say our system is superior. No, that's not a way. And I would say even anarcho-capitalist system would probably only be something for a small minority of people. And free private cities is probably something which will always stay a niche product. But the existence of such societies alone is changing the rest of the world, because they know, okay, if we treat people badly, then they just might go to the free private city. Or if the free private city might have an influence to the rest of the countries, like Hong Kong did influence the rest of China, as an example, and was copied by Deng Xiaoping and several times. Shenzhen is the most prominent one. So if people discover, hey, these people in the free private cities, they have a contract with their operator. Government, my government, I want a contract from you too, right? So this could happen. So that is how evolution works. It's not one size fits all. Conclusion: you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Don't argue, build. And I'm coming to the end. Matteo has already announced there's a book in several languages, including Italian in the meantime, and it's ebook, print, audible version, everything is available. And please have also a look at the website of the Free Private Cities Foundation. There's a newsletter coming about every 3 months. and it's telling you about the news developments in the sector, new potential projects or real projects. And if you are interested to become a resident there, you will be informed. So that is my invitation to have a look there. It's more explanations there on the website, FAQs and everything. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much. Now I'm happy to receive your questions.
Thank you, Titus, for the presentation. It was really clear, and it gave like a overview of the project, of the concept. I think it's like what you were saying, especially just dropping the idea, like the information that you're working with, like an African state, no, in an African that it's like a third world situation, that it needs expansion, and like it's growing like constantly at a really rapid pace, and yes, and often the state cannot stay at the same speed of the human growth, no. Then on this topic, I was wondering, of course, also with the examples of the seasteading, it's way easier kind of establishing a new free private cities in a land that it's unbuilt, uninhabited, no. It's virtually
Absolutely.
of nobody.
Yeah, it is much easier because you do not have to force people into a system they might not like, and secondly, there's always opposition, right? No matter what you offer, what you do, you will never get 100% consent. If there are 1,000 people already living there, it's problematic. So it's much easier to go in uninhabited land and invite new settlers there.
Yeah. Oh yes, also because you were like writing in the book that otherwise you would need like a consistent, not even a majority, but you would need like all the people to agree to be like respectful of this contract as well. And but then like the goal is at the end to, of course, I guess, let's say, emulate, like push also normal cities, existing ones, to adopt a model that is closer to the free private city model, isn't it?
Yeah, it should serve as an example, and probably will not take over all of it, but maybe some elements of it. And it's a just by showing that it works, the people vote by their feet, right? And that will also serve as an example, and they would say, hey, we don't like the free private cities, but this part works better than us, so maybe we take over just this part, right? That would be also already something.
It would move towards like more or less what's like Switzerland today, maybe, you know, that is like a confederate model where like the cantons are actually can be quite small, or would they be like even more? How do you see the relation of, like, for instance, Swiss confederation in relation to free private city? Because it's still like a democracy, it's still like a strong participation from the inhabitants, but it's still quite fragmented, and it helps people to be closer to the government that they choose.
Yes. Well, I think the element of Switzerland that is also part of the free private city concept is that is very decentralized, or compared to other countries, it's decentralized. You have a lot of local decision making, and you have a lot of competing jurisdictions, right? You have the local level, you have the canton, and you have the federal state, and the people also can vote down a law. So they are basically among the few people in the world that have the capacity to stop a change of social contract, right? Or maybe initiate it. So, but other than that, I would say it's a different model, because our model is really rather comparable to the Hanseatic League, where single cities, or like in Italy in the Middle Ages in Germany, you have these independent cities, city-states they called it, and these cities would maybe be allied all over the place. They would, because they share same values, they have kind of a comparable system. So I think this is rather a potential future for free private city is a kind of a new Hanseatic League.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, like it was a period of rich like prosperity, no? Also with
Yeah.
this with these times of in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. We have already a couple of questions. Let's pick the first one from Giovanni. It's on the screen. Thank you for the lecture. I would like to know whether, in your opinion, there is a risk of competition between the different cities. Would they become the object of speculation?
Well, I don't see competition as a risk. I think competition is good because it forces the city. If there's only one free private city, they can basically make whatever they do. But if there are two or three, and you're seeing this now in Honduras, you are forced as a city operator to be better than, or at least as good as your competitors. So that is a healthy process. Speculation, yeah, of course. If a city is listed on a stock exchange, for example, and people say, I think that's a good thing that has future. I invest there and then I sell it later. That can happen, but I don't think that a city would be constructed in a way that somebody could just buy the majority and then do whatever they want. Because even if you buy the majority of a city operator, the city operators still have to stick to their contracts, right? So it's a little bit comparable to you buy a cruise ship company, then you cannot just change the existing destinations, or because they are all laid down in the contracts that the tourists paid. So I don't think this is a big issue, and I would say competition is a good thing.
Maybe linked with this one, then we will take the new question. Then in this process of competition, of course, there is the risk that a city fails in its process, no, in their finances, in their administration, and so
Yes.
on. Then, on the other hand, a city that succeeds, they like I think as a company they would tend to grow, no, they would
Exactly. Yeah.
like they wish to grow. Then what happens in that case when a city that wants to grow then finishes the physical space? Would they be able to acquire another free private city? Would they be able to acquire like a failed private city?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then how would these existing citizens that are in this secondary city adapt to the one that buys the land?
Well, what I think, first of all, let's talk about the normal expansion scenario, right? Let's say we have established a free private city, it's very successful, but the contract is the host nation, and that's something I didn't point on. But at the moment, you cannot just grab land; it's not possible, right? So you have to make a contract with the host nation, and the host nation will not give you full sovereignty; it will give you partial sovereignty or partial autonomy, right? But so that means if you have a contract with the host nation and saying this is your territory, you cannot just grow. You have to stick in the territory. But what you can do if you are successful, you go to other nations and say, hey, look how successful we have been. It was a win-win situation for everybody involved. The country has more income now, has more jobs, more investment. The residents are happy, and I as an operator, I'm making money. Everybody's happy. So then other people, other countries, other nations would say, hey, this is a good idea. I want to have a free private city too. And then they would go to successful city providers rather than to newcomers. And now to your second aspect is, so you can grow by just replicating your model elsewhere. And in Honduras, for example, it's possible that the territory is growing if other landowners or by referendum whole communities just decide they want to be part of it, right? That is also a model that can be maybe accepted in some areas, can be an option. Then if a city fails, that is also possible. If it's a bad operator, and then what happens then? Well, actually, what happens then is not different from what happens in the world of industry and market. You become insolvent, and there's an administrator. All right, you have a regulation for that in your contract, or they say if we fell insolvent, several things are conceivable. First, another successful operator makes a bid. Say, we take over. Probably citizens would be happy, right? Or citizens themselves say, Let's make a citizen buyout or a resident buyout, right? We acquire the operating company on our own, and we hire a good manager, and they should continue. So it's not really a problem. It's already there, right? We know what happens with insolvent companies.
Then, so you were mentioning having the same private city that then goes to other countries to launch the idea. Then would
Mhm.
it be like kind of a decentralized state, kind of like sharing the same like passports, the free like a franchise almost,
Yeah, I
where
think
like
franchise is a good point. It could become a franchise, and I know the countries are different. So some countries in some parts of the world they have absolutely no problem if you wearing a gun, but in other areas they don't like that. Then some regions of the world have not a big problem if you take some marijuana or so. Others do have. So you will have different contracts with your host nation where you have to make compromises. So no free private city will be exactly the same, but nevertheless you can establish a kind of a franchise system, and you can also target different population groups, right? You could make a very conservative city, you can make a more socialist city, you can make an eco city, whatever the demand is. And so far, I can imagine that there are really some in the future, some successful providers who are franchising models of offering franchising models, or they're offering different types of free private city to different, and they maybe don't call it free private city to people who prefer a more statist socialist environment. They would then call it cooperative or whatever, but it would be the same idea, basic idea. It's a set of rules and you participate voluntarily. That's perfectly fine.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. Let's take another question. Very interesting. Customers to subjects. Is it possible to create an artificial islands in Europe, in the Venice Lagoon, for example? With how many inhabitants have you calculated if you can have the break
Mhm.
in point?
Yes. Um, Yeah, it's possible to create artificial islands, but it doesn't help you because you're still subject to the sovereignty of the state. You have this. They have always extended it from 3 miles to 12 miles, and now they have a 200 miles exclusive economic zone. I've just recently seen this video, this movie on Netflix about this Italian engineer who has created this artificial island off the coast of Rimini, at that time outside the 3 mile zone, right? And nevertheless, they've destroyed it, right? So, but I think that is the seasteading idea. You go on the high seas, right? But I think if you make an artificial island, you are basically a free private city that you have to make an agreement with the host nation, which is not possible within the European Union because the European or practically not possible because the European Union does exactly not want competing systems. They want, as they call it, harmonize everything, which means centralize everything, which means they do not like that. They don't even allow special economic zones, right? So, which is a much lesser form of a free private city in a way. So, no chance. With how many inhabitants? We have calculated about 10,000 for the services that we provide for this amount that I told you. About 10,000. After 10,000, we start to make money. Before we have to subsidize that by making land transactions, for example. At the beginning, we have all the land for the non-free private city environment price. Then we establish this framework, prices rise, and then we can make some money and subsidize the services until we have 10,000 paying people. Then we should make money. Just a rough figure. Probably that depends also on many, many factors. You can say we make a free private city where you have to pay 20,000 a year, and then of course it's much lower the number of inhabitants. But I'm calculating for the average guy, right? Monaco for everyone. That's the basic idea of the free private cities, not an enclave for the rich.
Yeah, because actually there's really this idea that also in the examples that you bring in the book and partly
Mm.
also in the presentation that the cities, the states that are closer to the model nowadays are more or less rich enclaves, no? For instance, because they offer protections to the one that afford to move in those places.
Yeah, but I mean, partly they have just become rich because they were doing that, right? For example, Monaco at one point in time was only 300 people left, and they were basically, even after World War II, they were broke. And then you have countries like Liechtenstein, who were rather rural, poor areas, who are very successful now. And then you have places like Dubai, which were not existing 40 years ago, right? And Dubai is also a place where, okay, there's a place for the rich, but it's also for not so rich people. It's there. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily small states that they're open to rich people, but I would rather say these states have become rich because they're doing the right things.
Yes, they
And
were.
now, of course, you have the problem that the prices of real estate is so high that only rich people can afford it. That is indeed a problem, but that also relates to the small size of countries like Monaco.
But then would private cities keep like small in size, or would they like expand accordingly to the contact with the host nation?
We
Because
are
then
trying to negotiate expansion possibilities in the contracts.
I see. Yes. But then also related with this idea of really fluctuating prices, but also diversity and the possibility that, of course, people may like move more frequently and choose more or less the
Yeah.
destination that they like. Would there then, because I mean, we know, for instance, in Venice, it has a really strong identity that it's built and it's there because of centuries of history. Then how would the identity of these cities be built also by the provider? Would this be like created as a marketing operation, or would it actually develop kind of on its own?
Very good question. I think it's important to understand that in the long term, you have to form something like a community, society, common values, common understanding to survive and to remain for a long time. And that's happened in Venice. That has happened in Venice. That has happened in other places. It's but it's even conceivable that it's not happening like in Dubai, but it nevertheless works. But I think in Singapore is a good example. They tried this to enforce that, right, by saying, hey, we have a common culture, we have a military service for everyone, so we are now becoming a nation or something like that. I think both of your options are conceivable. That first is that the operator is kind of encouraging that or giving some ideas that the people take or leave. And on the other hand, it will develop over time because people will find out that, hey, we are exceptionally free place. We are a place where people are living peacefully together. And that makes us proud and makes us kind of, hey, these are my fellow citizens here. We are all one group who is maybe standing against hostile international public opinion or whatever, and saying, no, we want to live our way of life, even if the majority of the world population is against it. And for no particular reason, just that they don't like it. And so that was the faith of Venice in the Middle Ages, and they survived for 1100 years without a single overthrow of the government. I mean, this is really, really strong. And they had big enemies all around, right? So, and I know that from history books in the Holy Roman Empire, especially in the German part, there were all kinds of envy to Venice, and they said wrong things about fake news about Venice just because they were so they couldn't get it that in a Middle Age where everybody was poor, there was such a rich city. Why is this so, right? I mean, things like that can happen, and then is a good and a bad thing. The good thing is that people then stick more together and say, hey, we didn't anything wrong to somebody, but we will just live our way of want to live our way of life, and others don't like it, so that makes us stick together more. But it also conceivable that people just try out a free private city here and there, then move away, and I don't know, frankly, Matteo. We will see how this is going to develop. But I can only tell you there's a city that should not be in existence, which is Dubai, because they have absolutely no common values, conversion, or anything. It's just many people obviously like it because they're there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And also, like, thinking that a city can create like this really like a homogeneity inside each of them. Actually, it seems that with like case studies existing right now, it seems that actually is the opposite. No, if they attract diversity somehow, if they have like some of a they
Yes.
have of course common values like
Yeah,
the.
I think this is basically both is true, right? So you will attract diversity if you offer a lot of freedom, because people can then be what they are, and in other places can't. But at the same time, you have to be very strict that some rules and values are kept, because otherwise it's a total chaos, and you will have groups fighting each other. So you say, okay, this is and that's why I think a private operator is the answer. You say these are the rules, and if you don't stick to rules, I kick you out, right? And there's no discussion about that, because that's what I do. I'm not society. I'm this government service provider. Society is developing itself, but within this framework, and then that will probably lead to a lot of diverse groups in the city, but which are not hostile, but just accepting that they have a different lifestyle that you have in cities today. But we have much more freedom. We have probably much less crime. And I think that can be a part of diversity which can flourish. But at the same time, these people have something in common. They are citizens of the free private city, and they know, okay, why they, or many people will know, why can we be here? Why can we live like we want to live? And they know, okay, this is because this framework is good. And that is what we have in common with our residents, which belong to a total different social group, but they have the same basis, the same foundation.
Yeah. Let's pick another question that it's related with really technical as before. How many people can a private city of 10,000 inhabitants employ? Because it's also a topic that you talk on the book, right? Like this, attracting also people that actually maybe they don't per se afford the city, but they like you attract low cost, not low cost labor, but like any kind of labor, because you need
Yeah,
also all the
exactly.
things.
Look, if you have, take for example Monaco. Monaco has 38,000 people, and 50 or 60,000 are working in Monaco. So there are a lot of people are commuting in and out, and they would live in Monaco if they could afford living in Monaco, right? Because the system is better. You don't pay taxes and you get higher salaries. So, but the problem is real estate is extremely expensive. Liechtenstein is the same. There are more people working there than living in the country. So you can employ a lot of people. You can employ easily 20,000 in a city of 10,000. But you can also say, no, we have enough space. You come and you live there, and then if you need to work to make a living, then just do it. So I don't know if this was the question, or was the question how many people are working in the city operator, which not many. For 10,000 people, probably I said 70, something like that. So including everything, police, fire, fighters, etc.
But also in this case, you count like 70 people, including like primary services, right? That could be potentially outsourced to.
Yeah, we would probably try to outsource as much as we can, right? It's just that the people would expect a certain level. And problem with, for example, it's outsourcing garbage is then some people would just save money and don't do it, right? So you'd probably we have to try it out, but we probably include it in the basic package and say you have to buy it, right? But that is something where you can either decide that the city would subcontract this, or we would really have a full competition in many areas. But in some areas it's difficult. For water and electricity and sewage, difficult to have a lot of competition over the roads or something like that. So then we would be the entrepreneur who's offering that. But there are a lot of ideas how this can be structured. I would say the core function of the free private city operator is security, providing security and being the security provider of the last resort. You can have private security, but at the end, default, if the decision comes, somebody has to be kicked out or arrested, that's us. Because if we don't do that, then the strongest guys will eventually prevail. Like we have seen in this chess in Seattle, this Capitol Hill autonomous zone, right? It's just who has the biggest guns is the ruler, right? And that's, some people might say, hey, we find out eventually what the market says, but I think it's not attractive to families, right? If I can guarantee security, people will come. If I don't, only some very advantageous people will go there, adventurous.
Clear. Then another question, because there is one. I asked the person to further explain it. I don't know if you want to maybe draw a guess on that. Do this with no money? Would it, like, maybe it means, would it be possible to do it without big investments from outside? Would it be possible that it would come from small investments, maybe?
Yeah, but it's difficult. I mean, if you only have a kind of a campground, yes, you can do it. But if you really want to do a city and attract people, it's like it's a business, right? You have to pre-invest. You have to take up money with venture capitalists and maybe idealists who put some money in. That's what we're currently doing with TIPOLIS, right? We're doing financing rounds, like traditional startup companies. And from this, we pay the land, we pay infrastructure. Then you will find other. I mean, you can find investors, real estate developers for everything, and you don't have to pay much. You have to steer the thing. Then you can make a lot of money out of the real estate transactions, and you can say we don't even have a fee. It's for free, right? Theoretically, that's possible, but I think the practical solution is you have to put in money upfront, especially if you're starting from scratch, right? Remember, we are starting these uninhabited areas, green field, and then we have to construct something. So that comes with a price tag. Because if you want to take over an existing city, which is, of course, it's cheaper and easier, then people might say, we don't want your contract. We don't want you. We want to stay as we are. And that happened in the US when Oliver Porter, who told me, the inventor of this Sandy Springs concept, they've privatized everything without the exception of police and courts. And that worked because they were establishing a new community, a new city out of unincorporated just houses being part of the county. And he said this was a very successful model and has a lot of support by the citizens. But when he tried to establish this model on existing communities, even when the service provider promised 25% less cost, it always failed. Because there were too many people entrenched with interest saying, oh, I will lose my job in the administration and this and that. So you never got a majority in the community parliaments for that. It only worked with new-founded communities. So that is a lesson, and that's, if you know how people are, I think it's understandable. But that also means if we start from scratch, we need a little bit more money.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. But also, last question, I think, regarding the time. Um, Most of the cities grew like in long time, and they
Yeah.
built, like relinking with the topic before, the idea of identity, but also the shape of the city itself, the
Mhm.
shape, like the places of the power that were like, especially like in medieval times, where when like urban planning was not a thing, um, it was kind of growing from bottom up, basically, the layout of the city. Would it be the same if a private investor would build the whole city new, just imposing an idea? Would the people inhabit it good, or would it yes, it's like a
Yeah,
mix.
that's a very good point. I mean, that is a big discussion. You have seen there are a lot of private city developments which are not free private city, they're just under the laws of any country. Where, or in China, right, where some people, some big architects have great ideas, like Brasilia, for example, right? And it's ugly, and people don't like it. As normal with architecture in the 20th century and 21st, it's ugly, so people don't like it. And the problem is that you can either do a top-down approach or bottom-up approach, right? So what we are trying is a kind of a compromise. We say, okay, we have a core area where we are setting the pace by saying, here's the port, there's one big street going up to the Agora, which is the main place, and then you have all the big nice buildings around there, and you have a certain style, and that's it. And other than that, you have just some freehold areas for roads and whatever, and then we let it happen. And the more you go to the outside, the more there would be even freak zones where you can do whatever you want. But if you have a house there, you know the next time some crazy guy is building a pink skyscraper in front of your house. But you notice in advance, right? You were moving in the freak zone, your problem. But again, it will be a mixture. So we will have, because it has to be attractive. If you want to attract people, it should look nice. So we are going to copy some ideas from classical architecture, from new urbanism, walking distance for everything. But we leave enough space for things to develop by themselves. So we can combine those two. And I mean, this is just an attempt, Matteo. Maybe after 10 years, we found out that wasn't the best idea. We should do it differently. But I think we can do it now without having to wait hundreds and hundreds of years until this developed, because we have all the knowledge from the past. We have so many technological possibilities, and we can really build up fast. And then if it's not good, we tear it down and build something better.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. Better try now than not trying ever. Um, Last question from the chat. Like any businesses, there is the possibility of failure. As Matteo was also saying before, in this case, is there a plan program that can help individuals who have entered the project? I
Yeah,
have
that
connected.
was that was basically this insolvency question, right? This can happen in the contract. There will be a provision that if there's an insolvency event, then there will be an administrator and will try to find a new operator, or the citizens have the opportunity to buy themselves the operator. Insolvency procedure means no more debt. That means you can start new. And in so far, I think this is not so much different from any company going broke. And this will also protect, like in the insolvency law, you're protecting the employees, and here you would protect the citizens with the same mechanisms.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Okay, I think we have reached the hour, so I think it's time to conclude. Um, Thank you, Titus, for your time and for sharing with us your vision. We'll for sure keep in touch and follow the updates of the projects.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for the interesting questions. And I would be happy if you would follow the newsletter and see what's going to happen, and maybe eventually become a resident in one of the free private
Yeah,
cities.
for sure. Why not? Yes, absolutely. Um, to the audience, I would like to remind that next week, Thursday, June 3rd, at 6:30, we'll have the third talk of the cycle. And this time it will be with the architect, Mexican-born architect Felix Madrazo, with the title Anarchism as a Consequence of External Changes. And with this, we can say goodbye and good evening to everybody and to you, Titus. See you soon. And thank you again.
Thank you. Goodbye.